Waniken. Wanikisak nitompaak natasuis kisakiwielm Siobhan nutomas masipiat kanatai masipiat natachui wikontam abniat yuat yukisaka katapatontama wanamu Sarah Katarisa ka wamini tompaak at Boston Conservatory ka Anui winikin wachi Tai ka Katherine katapatanamu wachi nakam yuat. Hello, everyone. My name is Siobhan, Growing Elm. I am a citizen of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, and I am here in Mashpee in Cape Cod, on the southern coast of Cape Cod. I'm on the ancestral homelands of my tribe, and I'm very, very happy to be here. Grateful to our presenters, Broadband Collaborative, Sarah and Teresa from Boston Conservatory. Thank you for having us. And of course, thank you to Katherine and Ty for this beautiful piece, Gwekanimad, Wind Changes Direction. I just wanted to open up by saying hello. Thanks for joining us tonight. And I wanted to toss it over to Ty and Kate to introduce themselves as well to everyone who's here on the call.
All right. Boo to the Jew, everyone, or Buju, Nij, Saguli, Tai, Defoe, Indigenous Cause, Waswaganin and Dunjapa, Magazan and Dodem, Wabunung, Jaunung, Nagai, Binung, Minoki, Wadinung, Migwachkai, Gakinigego, Abagan in the Gadego Maki, Migwachki, Jemanido, Adapanan, Aawasema. Hello, everyone. Greetings coming to you super live here in the Zooms. I said, boo to the Jew. It's the contemporary way of saying hello or welcome, or we usually say just bonjour, but had to give a little twist on it since we are having this talk back afterwards. I'm from the Oneida nation of Wisconsin on my mom's side, so I'm a citizen of the United Nation, and then on my father's side, I am Anishinaabe, and I am Eagle Clan as well as Turtle Clan, and let's see, yeah, a bunch of other things in there that we'll get into in terms of the talk back and everything, but that's just a little bit about who I am, and my pronouns are he, Ty, or just we, or you can just say, hey Ty, I got a question about whatever you have a question about, and we'll go that route. So miigwech, and I'll pass it over to Kate.
Thanks, Ty. Hi, everyone. My name is Kate Freer. I use she, her pronouns. I am zooming in from Lenape-Hoking, the stolen ancestral homelands of the Lenape peoples, known in colonized terms as Sunset Park, Brooklyn. I am a multimedia artist, a filmmaker, an educator, an organizer. I am a second generation Jewish refugee on my father's side, and I am French settler on my mother's side from like the Huguenots that came to the New York area in also Lenape lands in like the 1700s. Yeah. And Ty and I are both members of All My Relations Collective and longtime collaborators. And so thrilled to be here with you sharing this virtual space.
Katapatanamu, thank you both. So we're just going to do a little bit of framing first for this talk back, and then we will open this up to questions and answers type style of dialogue. We'd like to start by just declaring this a safe space. And so that means that, everyone can come here and bring their whole selves. And also to just remind you of using terms of respect. And if you're not sure about that, just type it in the chat and ask, for some guidance, and one of us will be happy to support in communicating as effectively and respectfully as possible throughout this talk back. And we also want to begin by acknowledging the land. So we invite all of you on the call to just chime in the chat you drop any knowledge that you have around the indigenous tribe, the original stewards of the land that you are on right now, whether this is your ancestral homeland, or whether or not you are on a tribe's land. Please drop that in the chat right now, and we will amplify that for us. Yes, the home of the Massachusetts, in the Wampanoag. Yeah, originally Wampanoag land. And that dividing line was created. Massachusetts, the waterways of the Nipmuc, Nikis, Aniwiwinikin, Manhattan, Nikis, all the hipsters call it Brooklyn, Massachusetts, Wampanoag, Manikin. Oh, Winnikisak, Jenny, Massachusetts. Manikin. Great. Wampanoag, Massachusetts. Neponset, Winnikin, Neponset. Anui, Winnikin. Great. So let's just take a moment to acknowledge the land, as this is an important part of being in that spirit of inclusion and ending erasure of Indigenous peoples. So when we are talking about Indigenous land, Native land, we're talking about all of it. Nikis, we're talking about all of it. That the North and Southern continent here is Indigenous land. And this really, it was informed beautifully by this piece by Ty and Kate, in all of the references to the land and how land is intrinsically tied to our being. In my language, in Wampanoag, land cannot be said without what's called a inalienable ending to it. So natakim, the word for land, aki, natakim, my land. It is of me. It is where I get my food. It is where my body goes to when I'm done with this stage of existence. There's so much that is intrinsically tied to the land, as well as language. So we want to just root and ground students here as well from Boston Conservatory and Berkeley, and to just remind you of where your school is located, and acknowledging that Wampanoag territory, while I am, here on the southern coast of Cape Cod, Wampanoag territory was all of the eastern seaboard here of Massachusetts. So at its height, the Wampanoag Territory was as far north as Gloucester, west to the Merrimack Rivers, these two rivers that run into Narragansett Bay, all of the islands and all of Cape Cod. And as colonization happened with the arrival of Europeans, it has names were changed, and smaller tribes and bands started to form as separation was starting to happen. So while we are here in Masipi, Wampanoag territory, that is embodied knowledge that we have, right? That lives in our ancestral knowledge, is all of this eastern seaboard of Massachusetts. And of course, in the 1600s, as early as the 1600s, we see different tribes start to come about, all connected to the Wampanoag Nation. And this knowledge of land leads to the land back movement. It is in relationship with Mother Earth, right, that we all live in, and that this is connected to our artistry as Indigenous artists, and is in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement, with Black reparations, they coexist together. And so, beginning with this land acknowledgement is not just ceremonial; it is a practice that really connects us to who we are. So it's not just performative, I should say. It is ceremonial in connecting us to who we are and our voices. A lot of you in conservatory are working on your voice, right? And the mechanics of the voice, and however that manifests itself for and connecting it in this way, connecting our voices not only to our physical bodies, but to all of these other ways of communicating language that is informed by the land. So please check out landback.org if you are interested and have a moment to do that. Ty and Kate, is there anything further that you wanted to add about this connection to land, language?
Yeah, miigwech so much for that, Siobhan. Wow. I love you just how you frame and are creating the container so that we can all engage in this discussion in a thoughtful way. And I was just sort of reminded of that teaching about the great tree of peace, that one where there's the tree in the middle, and it takes everybody from all sides, all perspectives to sort of view that tree. So while some side of the trees is sunny, the other part might be getting scorched and rainy, and another part might be flourishing, and another part there might be a bird's nest in it, right? So that's these large philosophies about ancient wisdom keeping are so important in keeping that alive. And I just love how you lifted up this idea about, that it isn't performative, that there are some things that can be, but what is the relationship between when you're creating truth telling versus like performativity? So I hope we can discuss that today as an arts community, right? Coming together and the importance of that for everybody to uplift land back as well as Native Indigenous and Black brothers and sisters and peoples. So appreciation.
Welcomely.
Yeah, I would just say, and yes, I very much agree, and thank you for saying that so beautifully and clearly. That the idea of performativity, land acknowledgement as a practice in what is known as the United States is fairly new, and just has been around just long enough to become very performative and something that a lot of organizations are starting to do, especially arts organizations, but it can become very prescriptive. And so, part of my work as a white-bodied individual, as an artist, as an activist, is constantly being in conversation with my relationship with the land and with Indigenous peoples, and what does that work look like for me in forming a real relationship and understanding what it is beyond just words. Um,
Beautiful, Tapatash. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing so that we can all see one another. Oh, yeah, there's everybody. All right. So we've just had our little framing and had the performance shown. And if there are any questions, please, we're going to, I believe you are able to unmute yourself and ask questions. I think there's an option to raise your hand if you'd like to raise your little electronic hand. You can also just wave me down. Um, we're, a cozy group right now. So please feel free to do that to kick us off with any questions that you may have as a result of watching the piece. Oh, I see. Yeah, Jenny's got her screen off, but that's cool. Yeah, come as you are and do what you need to do in order to be here. Yeah, absolutely. Mm. And I know that there have been uh, a lot of discussion lately, particularly around violence that has been happening, in our in our country right now, in terms of particularly Asian Americans and our Asian brothers and sisters, and with the with this presence um, of what seems to be a resistance to being in harmony, you know, with land, with language, with with how we connect to this. I'm just wondering, Ty and Kate, uh, is how is this, you know, the current events informing your process in bringing these pieces forward?
Yeah, great question. I love talking about this because I think, there's something to be said about art being a tool for social engagement, for civic dialogue to happen, for truth telling to occur. And I feel like is a tool for social change. And I think that um, art and the theater arts in particular is really important because it gives us a chance to sort of myself to express, right? Maybe things that have been invisibilized and silenced for 500 years. Wow. So there's something about, a liberatory factor in it. At the same time, running parallel about liberation, being an individual, being able to tell these stories, and also be a complex individual and artist that operates at various intersections of being indigenous and an artist at the same time, walking in a multiplicity of worlds. I mean, I think that is very, very exciting. Why people go to, I think, live and or virtual theater to also gain a better understanding or a cross cultural pollination of others who aren't like ourselves, right? And I think at the same time, what I find very exciting about it is to reach out to folks whose story has not ever been heard like ever before, and to inspire others so that they can contribute to the cultural fabric of complexities and celebrations and conflict and obstacles. And I feel we're at a sort of, it's perilous that we do this. And we're at the precipice of seeing that happen with on a national level and even on a global level with current events happening. And I think, quite frankly, I think it's also a way of healing, right? We heal ourselves, we can heal community, we can heal friendships, we can seek, forgiveness in whatever ways that we need to, and also seek balance. And that includes the land itself. If you are decolonizing your mind space and your heart space, you are also healing a development with your relationship to the land itself because of, right, stolen people brought to stolen lands with stolen labor on it. There's a way that you're contributing to this almost spiritual factor for the future generations yet to come. So that's how I sort of am viewing it. Adrienne Marie Brown writes a lot about fractals, right? The patterns that repeat themselves over and over again on small scales to larger scales. And I feel like that's the power of possibility that theater has to reach even just 12 of us here on this Zoom, right? And then you zoom out and see how many more people viewed something on YouTube. And then you zoom out even more of those conversations of people having more conversations about our meeting today. So I don't know. I'm really excited to know how active art can be.
Right.
Yeah, I love that. Also, the art as a tool for social change, for social impact, and we don't make art in a vacuum. No matter what time period you're creating something about, it exists now in the moment when it is being viewed and experienced. Um, and for me, and I know that what we are trying to do in our work is, some form of truth telling, a form of truth telling that is beyond just like a written fact or written words or something that is said to be true, something that can connect and ring true in your heart and your mind, and make those connections with audiences, and people. And if we think about the time that we're in right now, and think about racism and like the real impact of that, the like literal hate speak, the literal like death and the toll that it has on like the soul of this planet is huge.
Mm.
So and that is, again, if it's said often that race is a construct, but that doesn't, or racism is a construct, but it's not something that doesn't exist and doesn't impact people. So in some way it only serves to divide us. And if we are doing if we have this call as artists to reveal truths that connect us, we are combating that in a very active way. So in this time where the divisiveness of hate, um, of pitting people against each other is so ripe. It's more important now to tell art that is revealing truths about existence, especially ones that have been erased and manipulated to even further divide.
Mm. Thank you. Yeah, I just am looking in the chat and just thinking about those two answers, and then this first question here in the chat about training and how and how indigenous stories and art forms can or should be a part of arts programs. I am the result of a conservatory education where there was just, it was a vacuum. There was no indigeneity in my training as a theater artist. um, and so I would love to get, I have a lot to say about this, but I would love to get the artist's point of view about this in terms of training programs, because there, I believe that there are some faculty here on this call or who will see this in the future. And as someone who, came through both undergrad and grad level programs with not a single Indigenous playwright material put in my hands. It was things that I had to seek out myself. So I would just like to toss that subject over to you, Ty.
Wow, thanks so much, Siobhan. And yeah, I echo. I just saw a little Kate's message here. I could listen to you talk so much about this. You are just so filled with wisdom around this subject matter. So yeah, chime in anytime. So good. Um, and I will say, yeah, there is something to that, right? Like, I remember a time too where, at various conservatories and classes, it's like, oh, you need to be this clean sheet of paper, right? Or a blank canvas, right? Or you need to go to the academy, right? I'm sort of maybe throwing out terms that might resonate with people depending on, various decade or age group. But these kinds of terms, right, are so steeped in a white systemic model that it's like, well, okay, so and also at the same time the great settler colonial project, right, where a system is problematizing like ways of operating and being. So you want to tell students about, oh, you must be this blank canvas or this clean sheet of paper. Those are all, things, I think, to say, well, you must be, be basically, what is your approximation to whiteness, and how do you throw out who you are and how you got there to be something else, so that someone can either paint upon you in a landscape type form, or throw out maybe a certain tempo or rhythm about how you're breathing so you can take on someone else's language, which is the one all be all. And we might be familiar with this individual, right? The who is it? William Shakespeare. Does that sound familiar, right? And how are we, sort of benchmarking times of success and values, and what does that mean, and to whom, right? Like who's actually behind all of this? So I think now why it's so important, we're at the where we are at a crossroads, I think, because of all of the national events right now in that. And I think what's so exciting actually to me about conservatory teaching, being in the theater arts, and really dedicating life, passion, empathy towards the art itself, is that you get to reclaim space in your mind, in your heart, and reclaim truth so you can place it anywhere you go at all operations, depending on your job or role within, you know, theater itself, whether that's being a director, whether that's being an actor or a writer, or all three at the same time, right? So you can kind of see some of these systems playing out even in siloing people within the theater itself. I think there is something about you know, the demise of art aesthetic impulses, or, you know, various things about unconscious bias. I think that sometimes separate from the want and need of operating at your highest human potential, or Bamadazuin, as they say in Anishinaabe Moin, right? So you can lift up yourself and others to your highest human potential. I mean, isn't that mind blowing to think about, that if you were to do that for yourself and others, what kind of art or piece that you would want to make? But that being said, right, that's the utopic vision, and all of that takes a type of takes work. And I think, you know, what's so exciting right now, and I hope folks that are listening or who are in positions of leadership really encourage people to take that deep dive into uncovering and invoking what I'm thinking about as blood memory, right? So not only, I think, do Indigenous, Black, Asian Pacific Islander folks, and all people, quite frankly, have themselves and their family lineages from wherever you are in the world. And at the same time, right, there's a type of passed down historic trauma that goes with it. And then at the same time, there's also passed down historic growth, right? So these things can exist at the same time. And how amazing is it to invoke all of that in a single individual, whether you're a performer, writer, director, producer of something, so that you can tap into all those tools to make a amazing piece of theater that people can really relate to.
Mm. Mm. I love that. And how this also, you know, connects to language, right? Because not only are we supposed to, like you mentioned, you know, we're always in conservatories picking up, you know, specific languages. And
Hmm.
what I love also about this piece is that you do touch on that language of animals and nature, and that, you know, and I mentioned this in our last talk back, but it just resonates so much with me that all animals at one time spoke the same language, and that there is knowledge now, knowledge and awareness of the language that trees have, that they are in communication with one another through their roots. You know, if one is not doing well, they are in communication to a younger one that may be coming up. And, you know, having the name that I do have, it just speaks to, you know, that connected connective tissue that we're sometimes asked um, in these courses of study to push aside in order to amplify something that doesn't involve that. And so I love and say amen to everything you just said. Um, and I also just want to, just taking a look here in the chat, um, there was just one question I wanted to touch on here because I feel like it's connecting, from Alyssa's comment. Thank you for that in the chat here, and curiosity around thoughts on ways of engaging humility in predominantly white settler populated classrooms while honoring the joy and power of indigenous stories. Um, you know, how I guess how that can fit into these environments.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start in, and then I'll pass it to Kate, who also I'm sure has some great things to say. And I'll say this, you know, Lee Markle says, like, freedom is created, freedom is outside the box created for us.
Mm,
Right. So when you kind of think about that, if you sort of alleviate and decolonize your mind, right, to think in new patterns, new ways, that includes the heart, that includes, and then compassion and empathy will follow. Like, it's just, it feels like this almost human formulaic thing, right? And so I think it's constantly, um you know, the tactile nature of it, I think, is in the classroom, right? likened to in the rehearsal room. So it takes practice. Like, I think if, right, you want to be a bodybuilder, you just like don't decide that and next day you can like bench press like 252 pounds or squat that, right? It takes like practice. So you have to probably, give yourself some like positive reinforcement during this global pandemic that we're in to get out, to be in your body, to, embed all these things. And I feel like the same goes for anti-racist theater practice, social justice movements. If you aren't attuning yourself and your practice to it, it ain't just going to come and follow you because the system has it that it won't find you. So you have to go and find it. And that's, for some of us, it's our families are uplifting that, our nations, our tribes, our communities. And for some of us, we're like, wow, going to school, going to college, this is the first time I've ever got a chance to read a, Indigenous playwright or, encounter Indigenous piece. And that's for a specific reason that again likens to the great settler colonial project of silencing and invisibilizing people for particular reasons, because it all has to do with ownership of land, territory, intellectual property, capitalism, right? All those things were not of the good mind to value future generations to come, right? To create and steward wisdom so that Native people could be alive today, right? And that's very important to underscore. We see that nationally with, for example, Auntie Deb Holland, right? The first Indigenous woman, right? Secretary of Turtle Island. Wow, that just was like, you know what? Because there are so many missing and murdered Indigenous women in Turtle Island, I am going to create an entire unit that is for missing and murdered Indigenous women, and all people, quite frankly, need to be safe. And this will ensure the safety of all of us. Like, wow, that's amazing, because at one time, Native people, I think, were seen as objects on the land to be moved around, right? So it all goes back to history. Right? We're talking about tree Siobhan, growing elm, right? We are only one circle removed from past histories, literally. And I think like only horses, dogs, and native people were to be quantified through blood quantum, right? And so Deb Holland, working with the land, working with policy, I feel like becomes really important. So the more that we all know this, right? The more that you as an individual can invoke change in your small pod, your small circle, then your school, then so on and so forth, right? Creating a really complex, expansive network of change makers.
Yeah, I mean, it's all interconnected, right? So there's like the goal of changing hearts, there's the goal of revealing truths, and the goal of changing policy, and that has big impact. But I think from language to what is taught in the classrooms, you know, I can't imagine that my experience growing up in the Northeast is too different than many other, that many other white-bodied people, or people that are, part of the settler colonial project. The white supremacy culture is that, maybe because I was in a very progressive house, I had watched Smoke Signals and I had listened to Buffy St. Marie, but really for me, it wasn't until I started working with Ty a little bit over 4.5 years ago that I was really in relationship with Indigenous people, and in a very contemporary idea, because everything else had been through the media, and what I had been taught in school was so far away from anything, and everything that had been portrayed, other than Smoke Signals, which is just, by the way, if you haven't watched that, you have to watch that movie. It's so funny and amazing. Was pain. It was pain. It was a narrative that fed into erasure also, especially if it wasn't made by Indigenous peoples. And so what I love so much about especially Ty's work is that he brings this joy. And in that, it's like reclaiming space and reclaiming narrative and relationship. And there's so many like brilliant Indigenous artists right now that are really like leaning into that, and joy as a form of resistance and joy as a form of reclamation of space is so wonderful. And I think like that is the thing for me, like the richness that I um, get and give back in that reciprocal relationship. And the like, you know, as soon as you start down that road, it doesn't stop, you know, you like unlearn and relearn, and it just everything blows open and there is no going back. And I can't, like, every conversation reveals more about like, wow, I can't believe these ridiculous lies that I consumed and believed in every part of my being. Because why would I think that teachers are telling me something that's just false? How
Mm.
could I not know that Indigenous peoples weren't considered citizens of this country until 1978?
Mm.
Like, that's absurd. And so, and I think that, and then when you go into language even more, I think the more you, so the, what I, there's just, you know, I'm sorry, I'm going to reframe is that something that I'm always thinking about is like, what, as a white-bodied individual who is part of the dominant culture, you know, I should be set up like white supremacy culture is serving me. Like I am in a position where I can be very, I can work really well inside of this. So what do I have to gain
Mm.
if there is justice for all living things?
Mm.
Infinite, infinite possibilities there, the richness of those relationships, freedom in a way that I can't, like my mind will be free, I will be free from like the lies that were told, and I'll have these amazing relationships and understand then like also the knowledge that comes from indigenous peoples and teachings that have been passed down from generation to generation, which brings me back to language. Just even simply reading Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, and she's talking about language and how the way in Potawatomi, if you're talking about the earth, if you're talking about any living being from the rocks to the trees, you know, it is, they're all animate objects. And how could you possibly harm the earth if it's your relative? Anything, any living being. And that just like, you know, her saying that in that particular way, it changed everything for me. It shifted my relationship to the world and to all other people, understanding that the way that erasure and inanimate versus animate is in everything that I say in the English language, which is also a very gendered language, and how deep that is and how deeply that impacts my body as a colonized person. It's beyond even like my own understanding. And so I'm never going to turn back on that path, and I have forever to go.
Mm. Katapatash, Kate, and you'll notice, you know, I've got my pronouns here on my name, and Nakam is a pronoun, third person singular pronoun in our language, and it's not genderized. It's for it's just contextual, and that knowledge and awareness of what was already here. There's so many glimpses in the language in terms of understanding. You really step into the mindset of our ancestors when studying language. You and as Kate was referring to, we have, you know, been able to call some the sort of rules or examples of animacy, and a lot of it is things that you wouldn't necessarily deem animate in English or in other languages because of the role that they played within that object played within the life. So it was viewing things through the mindset of our ancestors that I think is so important for us to be able to carry. So thank you very much, Kate, for that. I just want to toss over to Mariana's question here. Good to see you. We, she has, there is a question here about for Ty, a performance related question in terms of your moment before. So your moment before, what is your moment before like with this piece? How do you launch into sharing your story and also represent so many others at the same time? And I think this really speaks to the weaving that you're doing together, not only with the story, but also the beautiful imagery that is also a part of it. And I want to add in there also the music. I can just tell that that is from you and your beautiful uh, you're just such a beautiful musician. Um, and she also adds here, there's no need to share your secrets if you don't want, you don't want to give away all your secrets. And, I know it can be very, solo work can be magical and private. So I'll just toss that question over to you. Thanks for that, Marnie.
Yeah, appreciation for that. I love it. And I love talking about all these nuanced details. Um, yeah, I think in solo work, especially for the virtual realm, right? It's kind of like making sure all that tech is happening. So it's truly developing a new relationship with time, right? And allowing so that you can even have the moment before like a type of performance where you're having to invoke text and invoke and engage people with this virtual interfacing here to really keep that truth telling on the edge. I think for me the moment before truly is um taking time to smudge. So I'm a big sensory kind of individual. So I like even here on the zooms my little rocks and sages and things from the earth around me, little sticks. I see Siobhan's got hers too. And you just like have these um, very tactile things to have in hands to also remind, right, that not only we are here in this physical realm, this physical world, but I think that for me it's like, oh, it's like there is something larger than self. So that's why I also have lots of rocks around me, something to hold in my hand, maybe from a hike that I did maybe a year ago, or a time where I was thinking about something. Kate and I both have found crunched leaves between books before, and we're like, how did this get there? Oh, this is from when we were conversing or having a conversation. We found this leaf and put it in a book, and we'll have that and talk about it. Oftentimes, I'll have like a necklace on that has a medicine pouch into it, where it's basically like a good old fashioned charm bracelet, but a pouch where it has medicines in there. And I feel like in the physical realm these things are really important for those reasons. And my moment before for sure is lighting a sage and or sweetgrass, depending on, I highly believe in the ceremonial ritual practice of my peoples, of the Anishinaabe people in particular, and as well as there are many other nations and communities that do this, but for me sparking sense of smell becomes really important. I'm a huge fan of that. To me, it's scientifically proven to literally change the molecules in the air so that I can, reclaim that space that I need to as a performer. Also, to get my mind ready to let everything that happened just, the week before, maybe even, the few hours before, right? Because it's this work, it takes a lot of heart and mind, and also my body. I'm putting my body through something very physical. So I really try to make sure I carve out those ritual practices for me. Oftentimes, in institutions, even in schools, because of the building. So, what's great about the virtual realm is that I get to be in my own space and I can light something where there is smoke, right? But when you think about places, that it's problematizes it, right? That's a cultural act that came with the Freedom of Religious Act. And as Kate mentioned in 1978, right, this is a mandated that Native people, one, are citizens, and at the same time are allowed to perform and participate in our own cultural practices and rituals without being thrown in jail or prison, right? So when you think about theater, for example, right, if I were to do that, would, at that time, that it's also a form of both ritualizing the moment and a form of reclaiming space for ancestors, right? So when I light that sage or sweetgrass, I'm bringing my ancestors past with me, so that I can tell the story to the future. So it has a past, present, and future like quality to it. Similar to some of the music, I'll put in, tactile my headphones and I'll listen to music to like, boom, get me emotionally right there. I'm sure for you of those runners out there or otherwise, or writers out there, you put on, exactly the tune when. Music is such a powerful tool because it enters our bodies, our minds, and our memories subconsciously. Subconsciously, it's one of those things. So, right when you think about the things that we're talking about today, supremacy, these like larger arching philosophical ideas about dismantling that, right? It both can also uplift, right? So, music is a tool of creating something formulaic to allow it to filtrate through your body, your system, and your mind to create a specific type of performance, right? So as an individual, it's thinking about how am I both is this in concert with me right now, or is this in chaos with me right now, right? And both of those things are needed to tell a good story, right? Because what's in a story? It's conflict. It's the stirring of truth telling, right? That's separate from the process. In process, right? We have a tendency to overlook that in settler colonialism theater practice, right? Because we're so emphasized on product, right? And the capitalization of ticket sales and discount codes and all these things, right? But what could be a world where we are valuing both things, right? So I have a tendency to think about that. And that is my moment before, so I can let all that go and come into the peace.
I have a tiny. Speaking of story, I have a tiny story, and yes, definitely what Ty was saying about us making art from our home right now is that we do have control over our space, and we can do all of the rituals. Which, as the one woman tech or operation over here, it's the let's check the connect, let's check the framing, let's make sure the green screen is working, let's check in with each other, let's light the sage and make sure that the space is ready. And Ty might play some music or but just like to get ourselves into a space where we can give of ourselves in the right way. And the thing that is kind of amazing is that every space that we go into that is not our own space, we always want to smudge. And this is important. It's part of our ritual. And you cannot imagine how difficult it is in so many spaces to get approval for that. Even though Sage is not going to set off the fire alarm, it's not part of the cultural protocols of the United States, and so it's always a fight. And I can remember this one time in when we were doing this huge Indigenous production in the Midwest in this big theater, and we had fought hard, like many emails, many communications about being able to smudge before the show on stage, and over and over and over again, and it was a fight. And in tech, we're like on the edge of saying yes, and they basically were saying no until they finally said yes. And then after that, all of a sudden it's somebody's birthday and somebody walks onto stage with a cake and a bunch of candles with open flame, and everybody starts singing.
Right.
Without even a question. So it's like, why is this protocol okay and this other one is not?
What are we silencing and why? Thank you for that. Thank you for that. So we're just gonna roll over here to the 60 dang 65 candles. My word.
Yeah, I remember it was like a fire. Speaking of fires, it was like a
Yes.
fire on that cake. It was a very one big flame. But I think that's how old the individual was whose birthday it was,
Right. And
which was great, but
Yeah, let's truth talk. If we're telling the truth,
Mhm.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I just wanted to turn we've just got a few minutes left and just wanted to turn to the beautiful moment there towards the end of Dear Future Ancestor. As a teacher of young people, of little ones, I just would like to know what your message is for the children. I know that we're often, guided by our elders and these stories of prophecy, very, very similar stories here that ring true for us out here out east. But what would be a message for our children? Something that I think we're not necessarily taught in conservatory to center children in our thought with our artistry. And I would just love to get your point of view on that.
Ooh, good question. I mean, talk about truth telling, right?
Mhm.
No filter on the small ones. Like, wow, some of the, like, right? They will tell you
Yeah.
exactly what they think and feel. And there is a reason in terms of, wisdom keeping and truth telling and democratizing process, right? Why, at many traditional native gatherings, not only do you have elders there, right? Who also do the very same thing, right? Oftentimes, no filters, will tell you exactly what they think, right?
Mhm.
When you think about that, you
Yeah,
think about our
auntie know it
youth.
all.
Yeah, aunties, know-it-alls, auntie runaways, they are present, but there is no in some nations and tribes, in particular my community as well, there isn't a special gathering if there isn't a young one present, right? There is nothing to be shared that is held sacred or special or a process if a young one isn't present, right?
Yeah.
Because what it's doing is breaking up those arduous rules that we think are in place for a particular reason, right? It may cause us to focus more, right, in a room. If you have like a small one, say like running around and doing, just so right, it really does change the affect of the room, the atmosphere of the room if you have a small one there, whether it's a baby or someone that is just has learned to walk for those specific reasons. So, dear future ancestor is I think it's just so important to recognize the future generations to come because they are the hope, the change, the light that I hope to see in the world, who are going to really carry these teachings forward. So when I say that to future ancestors, and I think that I really truly do hope that things are more peaceful and balanced for the young ones, that language is more vibrant and robust and domineering to their lives, because I do feel like there's a way that we can find a type of racial reconciliation, right? A type of forgiveness with each other. And if I don't have hope in the future for youth, then I don't know what's we gonna do. I think we better like do something and it better be fast. But I think I just wanted to say that about youth. I think that there is no better truth tellers um to your process than I've experienced with youth. It's just been amazing, actually.
Mm.
Very complex individuals who aren't necessarily influenced by right the system, the academy, the blank canvas, but fully showing up as themselves and who they are, and still developing.
Oh, Tapatash.
Mhm.
Kate? Little Raz point.
um, yeah, I mean, that's it. Every time we work with youth, and I love working with youth, I learned so much just about the way they walk through the world also.
Mm.
But the thing that I like, hi, speaking of, uh,
Hey.
is that like I'm always just completely, you know, why are we taught to stop asking why? So I
Mm.
would just say is that like keep asking why
Yeah.
always. Um, and try to like keep that like infinite creativity and curiosity. You know, I'm very impressed with the youth of today in any space, in every space, and they do give me hope. And I think that in a lot of the shows that Ty and I do, it could be viewed as something that is for youth, but I think it is for all peoples and all generations. And just because something is accessible to children doesn't mean it's not accessible to elders and everyone in between. And I think that's just about being able to speak and communicate. And yeah, that just because something is joyous doesn't make it any less serious.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for that. And you know, my friends here are chiming in some things that they always hear me say, which is trust the youth. You know, don't sleep on the young people because if we're talking about dismantling systems, and if there's anyone who can easily, you know, put together a system that will be functional, sustainable, that that will, you know, work, it is a young person. It is a young person. That just has that openness. And when we're talking about education, right, we're talking about not pouring in information. He's, we're talking, the true root of the word is educare, which means to call forward what is already there. And that is so integral in the life of a young person. They're calling forward, they're reaching. Right when they come out of the womb, they're reaching, they're grabbing that grip, that, you know, that tight grip that your baby has on your finger or your hair or your earring, you know. That is, you know, that is that exactly that sensorial experience that we're calling forward what is already there. And we want systems of education, we want conservatory programs that are putting out artists that call forward what is already within young people, or already within in us, in our spirits. And so our word in Wampanoag for spirit is ichi, which means there never was a time when you were not, and there will never be a time when you are not. So the idea of infinitude was here. It was here on these shores, here where your school is. And we want to be able to carry that forward, that we have infinite possibilities, and we have experienced this so beautifully through your piece. So thank you, Katapatanamu, Katapatontama, Wanamu, Teresa Castera, Katai, Kate. Thank you all so much for joining us. And of course, we are here. If there are any further questions, please feel free to reach out, and be happy to be in community with all of you. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Many hearts.
All the way.
Oh, there they are.
Many hearts.